So I'm Katerina. I'm a Google developer expert for Angular. I'm a software engineer at ThisDot. And, well, you can follow me on Twitter on CyberCity. And please do. So my talk's title is Exploring the Lighthouse, but my initial thought of calling this talk was, OMG, I'm doing everything wrong, and a face screaming with fear. But then I thought that this is too negative. So my next thought was I could name this I Knew I Was Right All Along and have an Hermione Granger GIF, but they wouldn't let me add a GIF in the title. So I ended up with Exploring the Lighthouse, which is slightly boring, but still. So today, we're going to talk about what Lighthouse is, how we can use it, and how you should use it, what audits it offers. We're going to see it in action. And then we're going to accept the fact that we're doing something wrong and what can we do from there. So a little bit about me. I'm a Google developer expert for Angular. This is actually one of the talks that I give that is not centered on Angular, so you're quite lucky. It's more general. I'm a software engineer at ThisDot. I organize Angular Athens. It's the Athenian meetup for Angular, obviously. I love web and Angular. And also, I love cats and chocolate. So if you approach me with a cat or a chocolate, I will be nice to you. So what is the Lighthouse? The Lighthouse is a tool, as it says on their GitHub repo. It's a tool containing a beacon light to guide developers. So it sort of is a beacon that shows you towards the right ways and all the good practices that you have to do and keeps you away from rocks and bad things that can ruin your site. And it runs your page through a number of audits to test its quality. And we're going to see this in more detail as we move. How can you use it and how should you use it? How can you use it? There are 4 ways actually to use it. It's through the Chrome DevTools. So if you run Chrome, to use Lighthouse, you have to have Chrome installed and you have to run Chrome. So if you go on Chrome DevTools and you go to the audits tab, you can run an audit there. You can also use the Chrome Lighthouse extension, but it's not the recommended way, but you can use it anyhow. You can also use it through Node. There is a Node command line tool. And you have to have Chrome installed. And if you're using it through the Node command line tool, you can customize it and run your own audits and customize the audits that you indeed want to use. And you can also add it as a Node module to your continuous integration systems, like have it in your whole process of what you're doing. How should you use it? Well, first of all, you need to define your needs and your audience first. Like Lighthouse is not a panacea. It's not that it's the single source of truth that you have to follow in every case. It does check for accessibility. It checks for performance in flaky networks. And today I'm running on a flaky network, so we're going to see this in action. It checks for compatibility with mobile devices, for the ability of your application to be a PWA, a progressive web application. It checks for search engine optimization techniques and more. So then it's always good to follow some, but also it's also good to follow some best practices. So why not? So how you're going to use it? You can check it as you go on DevTools, or you can run it in your automation tools, as we said. The Lighthouse tool will produce some results, either in a visual format or in a JSON format that you can automatically check. And these results will guide you as to what you need and what you want to change and follow. OK, so now let's see an example in action. I'll try to run Lighthouse here, but if the network is really bad, I have already run it before, so we can see the result. So this is online. As you can see, I'm running on Chrome. So if we run a Lighthouse audit, to check for desktop, to check all the audits that it offers, and run it on my slides, we're going to see the results and see how performant and accessible and everything Google Slides is. So as it runs through the audit. It simulates different types of networks, different device sizes, different types of connections. So we're going to see it as we go. it's taking a bit long, but it's quite the presentation is quite heavy anyhow. Okay, let's see. I'm sure you're all wondering what the score is going to be on Google Slides with Google's tool. Okay, come on, almost there. So you have to keep in mind that what we said before, that you don't need all your applications to score best on all types of audits, because each application targets a different audience, targets a different purpose. So the results we're going to see target things that Slides wants to address. Okay, maybe I should have shown the complete audit. We're almost there. So it's checking now. No. It does check how the application performs in no internet environments and no JavaScript environments. So it shows what's happening when there's no JavaScript enabled or when there's no internet enabled. So these are the results. So as you can see, it is very accessible. It's 60% best practices, 50% SEO. So if we, let me zoom in here. So these are the actual audits. This shows the painting times of how things appear. And it shows in red things that are not being done correctly. But Google Slides, I guess, doesn't need, and the editing version of Google Slides doesn't need to be a progressive web app. It doesn't need to be super performant on bad networks. So, I mean, again, you choose what you want. Now, let's go back to our slides. Okay. Where were we? Here. So, to spare you the moment of waiting, I had run this before. So I have created an application, which we're going to see next, which is Katerina's page, which scores almost best in everything. And we're going to see how I achieved this. And this is the link that you're going to go at the end. So let's see the audits that Lighthouse offers one by one. First is the performance, then the progressive web application, then the accessibility, which is one of my favorites because it checks a lot of things that I didn't have in mind when I first started using Lighthouse. Then the best practices that you can follow, and search engine optimization techniques. So performance, I'm going to, from each different audit, I'm going to share with you my favorites, because to share all, it would take us like 3 hours. So first thing you need to do, and never forget about that, is to watch out for your CSS. So first of all, you need to defer and use CSS. Then tree shake your CSS, like throw away all the rules that are not needed, that you're not using, that are duplicate. Then you can include critical for render CSS rules in your head, like you have a web page and you have some rules that define sort of the main layout. You can add like a couple of rules in your head so that CSS doesn't, so that your page doesn't need to wait for an external CSS to load in order to have like a first styled contents appear on first load. And then you can minify your CSS so that the load time is even less. The other thing you need to pay attention to, which I very recently started paying attention to when creating web applications, is the fold. So you know how newspapers are in newsstands, and a newspaper is very large, and they fold it, and they have it there in the stand, and the first thing you see is everything that is above the fold, so it's the title and the first things that you see. The same thing applies to web pages, okay? So you load a web page, either on your mobile or on your desktop, and you only see the top of the page. So this is above the fold. And the content that is below the fold is not visible on first load, of course. You have to scroll to see it. So you can lazy load resources that are not visible at a point when they're about to be visible. I'm going to show you a graphic example afterwards to understand what I'm saying, if I'm not saying it correctly. And you can use intersection observer, or your favorite framework's lazy loader to take care of that. So let's see an example. So this is the application I'm going to show you afterwards. So first of all, it has some pictures, it has a description of who I am, a YouTube video, a Twitter feed, and some images. So if we were going to lazy load some resources, what we would do was that that would be the content that would be above the fold, and these two separate things, like the Twitter feed and the cat pictures, would be below the fold. And we could lazy load these resources. We could add an intersection to the intersection, 2 points to intersect, say here and there, and then load these things after the intersection. So how do you use the intersection observer, for example? You add a pixel, or you add an HTML element that you want to observe, and when this element comes into view, you start loading things that are below that. So yeah, that was that. The next thing that Lighthouse looks at is performance. So my favorite thing in performance, one of my favorites, is image optimization. So you have to optimize images. First of all, look out for enormous images. Like if you're going to show an image like a profile picture or something that is only going to be like 300 by 300 pixels, don't load the image to be like 1,000 pixels. Or even something, if you're going to show a logo that is going to be 52 pixels, don't load it with 300 pixels. This already reduces the size. Also, try to use next generation formats like WebP or JPEG 2000 to also minimize the size of the images. And you can use the Squoosh app. I'll have the links at the end. Anyhow, which makes a very nice optimization of images and sizes. So also check your painting times. As we saw before, when we actually run Lighthouse, Lighthouse will try to see how your application is going to load each second that is passing. So first of all, obviously, the main things are going to load, the easy things like the text and everything, and progressively the videos are going to load. So check your painting times and make sure that the content that is visible to the user in the first few seconds makes some sense. Okay, let me drink some water. Then we have the progressive web application and things to look at. So first of all, we have the manifest.json file. The manifest.json file contains metadata which associates it with the web application. It contains the application's name, links to icons, the preferred URL that your users should use when they open the application, or that the application will use when you add it as an application to your mobile screen. Also, it sets a default orientation if you want your application to be portrait or landscape, and the display mode, and the scope, which is the URL, if there is a deeper URL. So a manifest would look like this. So how many of you are using PWAs and manifests and everything? Okay, cool. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the things that are needed for your app to pass the PWA audit on Lighthouse is that your app should have a short name, a name, an icon, so that it can display on your home screen, the start URL, a background color, a display, and the theme color. The theme color is the color in the address bar that your browser is going to paint. So also you have to add the theme color in your HTML code and the manifest, and these have to match. And then also have a service worker. So you need to register a service worker. The service worker must listen to 3 different events: the install, the fetch, and the activate events. And the service worker must make sure your app will work offline, or at least respond with 200 using your cache, and it will work as a proxy to respond with a cache version. So let's see how this would work. First of all, register your service worker in your app's entry point, which is usually the main.js or whatever you call it. Check, of course, in the navigator that the service worker exists, and then register it in the correct scope. And then in your service worker.js, listen for an install event, and then open your cache and add some things to your cache so that they can be served when your app is offline, and it will fetch the content from your browser's cache. So for example, here, I am caching the index.html, the styles, and I am also caching here an image that will that will act as a placeholder for all images when the app is served offline. So this is very useful when you just want your application to have the same look and feel, either online or offline, and without having to cache all images that are there. Now, the fetch event is, so whenever your browser tries to connect to the internet and fetch the resource, we are having here the service worker to respond in this way. So it will first check the cache. I think I have, okay. It will first check the cache to see if there is a cached request. So when the browser tries to fetch main CSS is cached, so it's going to return it. Or try to load something from the internet. When there's nothing to load, it's going to go into the cache. And for example, here, if it finds an image that is in .webp, it's going to respond with the offline asset. So in that case, you can hijack requests and you can create your own version of the offline application with this simple way. So this will pass the PWA Lighthouse audit. Another two little things. You have to serve it over HTTPS. And in any case, you could not use the service worker if you don't. And everything is right so that the user will be prompted to install the web application. So if the user hasn't installed the web application already, or if the user is interacting already with your application for a little bit of time, they're going to be prompted to install it in their home screen. So after all this is done, then everything will pass for your audits. So for example, this is how the application I have created will look on your mobile pages. You will get the theme color on the address bar. You will get the add to home screen button, and everything will be fine. Now, as far as accessibility is concerned, accessibility, in my opinion, is very easy to do right, but also it's very, very easy to do wrong, to just forget some things and skip some obvious things that we all forget to do. So Lighthouse will check if screen readers can understand your content, your page and your content. And they will check also if they can engage fully with it. But there are more things into accessibility that you should check by yourself. So naming. One of the most obvious things is to give your buttons a descriptive name and give links a descriptive name. So for example, if we had a link that would link to our kitten diet, instead of naming the link here, you would better name your link kitten diet. What I mean is, when a screen reader goes through the screen, it will check the links, and if somebody was going to go on a link, here would be a non-descriptive name, and they wouldn't understand anything. Whereas kitten diet would be very, very descriptive. So Lighthouse will check for links with names like here, this thing, so it will mark these as wrong. Also use accessible rich internet application attributes and labels, ARIA labels, but use them correctly, because if you don't use them correctly, they will guide your users away from what you're indeed meaning. ARIA attributes are read by screen readers to inform users about your elements, and use role attributes too. So before we talked about tab index, so take care of clickable elements. If you have a clickable element that is not a button, make sure that you give it a tab index of 0, and also make sure that you give it the role of a button. So when a user uses a keyboard or a tab or a screen reader to navigate through your application, this is added in the flow, and it is focusable. As far as best practices are concerned, there are lots to do here. Mainly, don't use dangerous things like document write or deprecated APIs or libraries that have non-vulnerabilities, but they should be obvious. And use common sense, like avoid showing notifications on page loads and overwhelming the user like that. And as far as ACO is concerned, search engine optimization, again, there's a lot to do here. Lighthouse will check some things. First of all, add a description meta tag to your and the title meta tag to your page. We're going to see these in the code afterwards, but make sure these exist so that web crawlers and search engines know what to display in their results. Add URL canonical link tag. The canonical link will actually tell crawlers which URL to crawl. So if, for example, you have an application and you have different links for this application, different versions of this application, say that are shown on desktop, on mobile, or on different kind of networks, you have to add in your index.html a canonical link to tell the web crawler which page to crawl. I don't know if I'm making sense. I think I am. And also, if you want to optimize better, then obviously don't block your page from indexing and don't include an invalid robot.txt file. And another tip for SEO that Lighthouse will not check, and we're not going to go deep now because it's a whole different story, is use structured data. And I provide links in the end so we can see it. OK, so let's see it in action. OK, where is it? So this application, I'm going to. So this application will start off. Sorry. So this application started off as something that was not in any way passing audits. So let's delete everything. Clear site data. Yes. Or not. Why? OK, give him one more chance, and we're going to see something else then. All these errors are from, most of these errors are from Twitter because I have a blocker, but OK. So let's see the code. Maybe it's better. So as I started this application, it starts as a very, very simple HTML with no extra tags, no service worker, nothing, with large images, with not very descriptive links, with things that are clickable that don't have any roles. So progressively, OK, I'm going to try one more time. Sorry about that. OK, so if we tried to run an audit now, that supposedly it doesn't have all the things that should make it a progressive web application, or performant, or following best practices. Let's see what would happen. Okay. So indeed, there was no. Okay, let's see. So, so on first run with nothing in the index, nothing that would make it a progressive web app or best practices, it shows a lot of errors. Okay, so we don't have properly sized images. I don't know if you can see or you want me to zoom even more. We don't have properly sized images. There's nothing in the PWA checklist that is passing. It's not very accessible. Things don't have titles, don't have alt attributes. Okay, HTTPS we're not anyhow because we're on local hosts. And we don't have a viewport. We don't have legible font sizes. Everything is wrong. So if we go... we're not going to do this for every step because apparently it's not very efficient now, but if we just start adding more things progressively, okay, let's go to step 3 immediately. Don't laugh, I can hear you. You're making my nightmare become the truth. No. Okay, so if we start progressively adding things, and I'm going to show you the code now. So if we, okay, now we have added a lot of things that will make it a progressive web application, like adding the icons, adding a theme color, adding again a description for the SEO, adding a tab index and role to things that are clickable. And again, we run a new audit for mobile. Then we're going to see that the scores are improving. So we're just seeing that by doing some very simple things, we can create a better experience for a larger group of users. Users that are on mobile solely, users that use a keyboard solely. So by doing very, very simple things like adding some tags, adding some roles, adding some attributes, instantly an application is better for more people. Also here we have added, again, the service worker in the way I showed you, which will do this thing. It will serve with an offline image when we're offline, and we're going to see that now. Okay, it's not done yet, but we're going to see it soon. Again, in the manifest, we have all the different sizes of icons that somebody might use on their front page, etc. So almost there. Okay. That's strange, but never mind. So again, we have maybe the service worker wasn't registered correctly, but again, now with just a few things, we have 100% on accessibility and 100% on search engine optimization very, very easily. So now we're not going to run the audit again, don't worry, but we're going to go to the final step and check it in an offline environment so that you can see what I mean. So now that we have a final version of the application where everything is in place, in our scripts, we are registering the service worker. Where is it? We're registering the service worker. Then we're adding we are listening for the before install prompt event that afterwards we're going to use it to trigger the installation prompt for mobile devices. And everything is in place. We also have our structured data, which we're not going to talk about. We have an install button. We have correct link names. We have everything. And we also have in our service worker, as we said, the respond with an image when we are offline. Okay, so if we refresh now, we're not doing the audit, don't worry. And again, okay, we clear all the cache. We refresh. We see that our service worker is registered. These are on the DevTools. So if we now try to use the application in a network that is offline, no, not from here though. So let me go. So if we want now to check it offline and we refresh, all images will be served like that, apart from Twitter and YouTube, of course, which have their own cache. So this way, service worker will change our requests to respond in that way. And if we refresh again, you will see that the only thing that is asking is the fonts, which is already in the cache. So now I hope that some of you are thinking that you are doing something wrong. You are forgetting to add the correct labels here and there. You are not building everything with the best practices there is. So you're saying, I'm doing everything wrong, now what? Well, chances are you're not doing everything wrong. As mentioned in the intro, you have to define your goal. Not all audits apply to every website. So first of all, you have to think of use case scenarios, think of what you need to achieve, think of what your client wants to achieve by the web app they're building, and ask yourself things like that, like, do we need search engine optimization? Because we're just running an within company application, then maybe we're not. Do we need the best performance there is? Because our application is just used to build large things, or I don't know, like the Google Slides thing or whatever. So not all audits are for every application there, of course. Recognize your audience and users. Not all pages are for everyone. Not all web apps need to be responsive because you don't want to serve everything on all devices. Not all web applications need to be accessible for everyone because maybe you just need your application to work for a specific reason. And your audience and users differ each time. So you need to question whether you need performance in bad networks, whether you need responsiveness and accessibility, whether you need your application to be a PWA. So what? So start using Lighthouse not as a single source of truth, as we said, and not as the thing that has to guide you through everything. I never thought you would anyway. But just use it as a general guide to show you towards a better use of some internet technologies and some web technologies that you're already using. In any case, you can customize your audits, as we said, and target the things that you really need. And of course, after you clearly identify what you need. If you want to read more, I have some links. I will share the slide links in the end so that you can go and click on these purple things. And there are a lot of tutorials out there that you can use to achieve what you need. And thanks. Here is the slides. And do follow me on Twitter. And I'll post the slides there and everything you might need. And thank you.